Hi everyone, how you guys doing? This is Roman with Holistic Dog Training, and today I have a co-host, Morgan Fitzgerald, and I'm gonna talk
Oh,
about that a little bit. And ADD person here, I have to pull up my my little speech. Meet Morgan Fitzgerald, founder of Holistic Dogs, an animal center venture with a background in professional dog grooming, canine behavior, and holistic pet care. Morgan brings a wealth of experience and a deep passion for animals on the table, on the grooming table, and beyond. Her journey began with childhood interactions with a boa constrictor named Buzz. Ooh, okay. And developed a unique ability to communicate with the animals on their level. See, snake medicine. Over the years, Morgan's dedicated to animals' welfare, well-being, has driven to become a certified in various fields, including pet care, aid and CPR, animal reiki, and holistic veterinary care. As a woman-owned professional at Holistic Hounds, she strives to share her knowledge and insight and holistic approach to pet care with a broader audience. So, welcome. I
thank
see
you.
you're fully in nature. What's going on there?
Yeah, so since we live in our RV, we stay in the woods a lot. We're fortunate to kind of have our own slice of nature away from other humans for the most part, during the weekend, anyways, when we're not working.
Awesome. So, we were on Facebook, and all of a sudden, I was like, I like what she's sharing. So, you share all these a better, healthier philosophical approach into animal care and grooming, and in general of preventative and proactive cooperative care. And like what you had to share, so push that like button and then a follow button, and well, here we are, a couple of months later, and I'm interested to hear about your journey into that holistic approach because it's I have to say it's easy to say holistic and it's
Mm,
very difficult to be holistic.
right,
So how
exactly.
did you end up there?
So a lot of it is from personal experience. So I started off working in a dog grooming salon. And at the time I wasn't super well versed in dog behavior yet. And so a lot of red flags showed up for me right away when I was working professionally with dogs. And I was kind of seeing how, in general, we were kind of just treating dogs as if they were property. And in a conventional grooming salon, it's very fast paced. And so a lot of times it's not really tailored for that dog specifically. So there was a lot of dogs that you could just tell needed a little bit of extra care, and as far as I was concerned, my training was basically just get the job done and do what you need to do. So I didn't last very long in the conventional grooming salon setting because of that. And so then after that, I went on to work in dog daycares and boarding facilities. And that's where I spent the majority of my time working professionally in dog daycares. And again, this was before I had a lot of knowledge on dog behavior, but I did learn a lot of that firsthand. The reason why I decided to take a more holistic approach towards what I was doing was just seeing kind of a lot of the trauma that was inflicted upon dogs in these conventional settings. It was very upsetting to be a part of a group that they really do love the dogs, but they're kind of lacking in the educational part of how to properly care for them. And so, just a quick example of how they just throw us into it at a dog daycare. My first day, I was responsible for over 20 dogs by myself. And the way that they typically manage these dog groups is with spray bottles. And so we know that that's aversive and it leads to trauma. So I saw that happen with the dogs I was taking care of because that those were the resources we were given as far as managing dog play groups was the spray bottles. And so there was actually an incident where the one facility I worked in, a dog passed away due to an injury from a dog fight. And that was very upsetting for me because I was the one that found the dog the next morning. And so after that, I was like, all right, we need some more training and
Oh, gotcha.
that sort of thing. So after that, that's when I kind of had to say goodbye to working for someone else. And that's when I started my own business. And I decided that I was going to take a holistic approach because it was very necessary. And I've had a lot of pushback in getting started with my holistic grooming um, business, because a lot of people are they kind of laugh at, oh, you're giving a dog consent. And so having a supportive community, it makes all the difference to, really keep me going with what I'm doing.
I hear you. Been there.
Yeah,
Um, and it's sad that we have even to talk about it, and it's frustrating that it has become um, product oriented money making system.
right,
There is no interest on the dog's well being, and as a end user, and as a client, I've been to different grooming shops and mobile grooming shops and big box grooming shops and little grooming shops and in home grooming shops that come to your place. And I've seen over the years in different countries also those different approaches and how basically there are two categories: the one who care for the dogs and the other ones who just care for the business.
right.
And I like that you choose the holistic path to care for the animals over business, because sometimes it's to make a choice. Animals over business means that if that dog really struggles, you just don't do business. You just say, you
Right.
know what, we need to work earlier before I can work with your dog. So here are the few things that you should do so your dog has a better experience working with me on a table,
Yeah. And
right?
so, like with the dog daycares, some of the dogs they weren't a good candidate for that environment at all. And so I was under the impression if a dog wasn't doing well, that we would tell the guardian and we would say, we're not thinking this is a good fit, but they really wouldn't. I mean, they would just let the dog sit there and cower and shake the whole day. And then upon pickup, yeah, so and so had a great day.
Right? She
When,
was awesome. She had so many friends.
yeah,
I
because
like
they don't wanna let the client go because they want the money, but, I was kind of more on the end of, "Let's have the dogs here that are actually doing good," and honestly, most dogs don't do well in the dog daycare setting. There's maybe a
Mhm.
handful that do okay, and aside
Well,
from that.
it's not different than having vacation in Alcatraz. Like, really? In a cage, dogs barking, anxiety, stress, limited outings. The swimming pool in the property doesn't make any difference how the dog feels in his compartment.
Right. And
And
dog fights are so common in dog daycares, and something that was alarming to me was that we didn't always tell the parents about that, even if it was something very minor. There was a lot of information that was kept away from the guardians. And so obviously that, to me was a red flag, because then they're like, well, why is my dog lunging at other dogs on walks? And a
suddenly,
lot of it was because of the problems they were having at dog daycare.
right, right. So, one thing we're going to talk about today, and I appreciate everyone's feedback, and maybe you want to share your personal experience from our audience. How was your experience with boarding or grooming or veterinary care with your dog or your cat? Actually, more for the dog community we're talking about, but cats too. Sometimes you have the whole family there, kind of thing. What was your experience? Because in our subject, we're going to talk about the problems in the industry. We're going to talk about the lack of education that we have as clients. And then we also will talk about the lack of education the professionals have, and how kind of at the end we want to kind of call to action. What can we do to address this issue? Because it's a global issue. It's not just in US, it's not just, here and there, it's everywhere. And it becomes bigger and bigger the more people tap into this money making machine.
Yeah.
So you started as a groomer and then worked in animal care, but also with veterinary care.
So no, I haven't worked in veterinary care. I am studying holistic veterinary care. So I haven't actually taken place in it, but I hope to in the future once I get some more training. Someone that I follow closely is Dr. Karen Becker. She's a holistic veterinarian, and then the father of homeopathy is Dr. Richard Pitcairn. And so he's an amazing resource for pet parents to and pet professionals. He has a book that's Natural Health for Dogs and Cats, and that's the book that I've studied up on the most. And he talks about a range of different healing modalities and things like that. A lot about nutrition, which is something that I think a lot of pet parents and pet professionals need a little bit more education about, which is very helpful information to have.
Mm. It's interesting because people don't see the connection food, stinky dog,
And
right?
sometimes I think even the food could tie in with the behavior as well.
This is correct. Absolutely. So, from let's say, for example, let's start all the way to the very beginning puppies. You got a puppy, and let's look a little bit the timeline into that process. So, the first we get a puppy, the first thing we're going to do likely is getting him to the vet and do a deworming and kind of make the first contact with the vet. Where are the risks for the puppy to end up in a traumatic incident? Can you hear me?
Yeah. So you're talking puppyhood trauma.
Yeah, the early puppies. Let's go through the timelines a little bit so people become aware when trauma can kick in that
Yeah,
timeline.
so honestly, I would say that your dog can have trauma before you even adopt them, and they can have ancestral trauma that was carried through their parents. And so there's a lot of different ways that puppies can end up with trauma. And so sometimes before we've even adopted the dog already has trauma. And even if it isn't, an older dog, it could be a puppy that maybe had an experience when they were really little. And the problem sometimes is that we can't always take a magnifying glass and look at that because we don't always have the ability to know exactly what might have happened. And so really adopting any dog, you kind of just assume that there's maybe some trauma somewhere in there. And I always say if you're lucky, you might only have some micro traumas to heal from, but mostly I think dogs in general, and especially obviously rescues, um, there's always at least a little level of trauma already there. And so I think that really stems from the dogs being so sensitive, and being they're very in tune with their environment. They're very in tune with energy as well. And so I think that that's why that dogs particularly take on so much trauma at a young age, because they're so sensitive and they're so intelligent. And so whenever I'm talking about trauma, I always like to remind myself that we don't really get to decide what was traumatizing for that dog, because every dog's different. So every dog is going to be a little bit more sensitive in different areas. So what might be traumatizing for one dog might not be for another. But the puppyhood trauma is, I think, largely it would be either passed down or maybe some experience that they had, either with breeding or in the environment that they grew up in. And so it's not always the pet carers, it's not the trauma being caused by us initially, anyways. So I think it's important to remember that, it's not our fault that the dog has trauma, and that it's up to us to take responsibility and to do what we can to heal that trauma.
I see very often when working with remote clients, and you're gonna likely confirm it. When we talk about trauma, people get offensive. My dog doesn't have trauma. I love my dog. I care for my dog. And then we have to explain, the underlying trauma and how it becomes a trauma.
Hmm.
People don't recognizing that even the relocation from one place to the other can be a trauma.
Right.
Relocation stress can cause trauma. Um, Inside the breeder kennel, inside the breeding facilities, inside the breeder's home, things can happen. Lack of nutrition, lack of care, loud noises can start causing trauma to the dogs, and so that is being carried on, and it doesn't show up. right in the moment. It showed up later when the dog
Right.
starts being exposed to a new environment, and then health conditions come in, medical conditions, trauma through wrong treatment, wrong food support, and all these things all of a sudden become prevalent when we start having changes of environmental factors, because every time the dog gets stressed, that trauma will kick in. Loud noises, trauma kicked in. The dog gets a little bit stressed, resource guarding, and all of a sudden becomes bigger and bigger, and then it just adds to it, adds to it. And it's not just breed specific. Any dog can have trauma at any time in his lifetime, but the most vulnerable time is basically the first 16 weeks. And then we have a second phase, which is the first 16 months, and then other issues. But let's stay a little bit focused on the parts. How can we support as professionals, um, and help people understand the trauma? So what's your approach and your understanding about trauma?
So, coming from somebody who has trauma myself, it makes it a lot easier for me to relate to the dogs. And so I think a lot of other people could probably relate to that as well. I think that there's a very spiritual component to trauma because a lot of times they say that all of this trauma, all of these behavioral issues or whatever it is, it starts at a subtle level first. And so it's very much a spiritual issue that we kind of deal with it and we see in a physical way. And so for me, when it comes to trauma, I like the trauma informed approach. So the trauma informed approach essentially tells us that we all might have some trauma, the humans involved with the animal caretaking and then the animals as well. And so, like, specifically developing certain protocols for to kind of to mitigate that trauma a little bit. So for example, like with dog grooming, a lot of puppies end up with grooming trauma, and that's usually from being introduced a little bit too quickly to the grooming process. And so for like example, for holistic hounds, we have a specific protocol for puppies to avoid grooming trauma. And so we'll work slowly with puppies specifically to make sure that we're doing this in a positive way that creates a positive association. So, like, for example, if you wait, to take your dog in for a grooming session until they're 6 months, and then you take them in at 6 months and you want an entire full groom to happen and you expect it to be perfect, it's not really a realistic goal because you got to start slow. And I think that just taking a slow approach with dogs, it really does make a big difference in making it a more calming experience for them, whatever it is. If it's training, if it's, going to the vet, whatever it is. Just kind of taking it slow, especially with puppies or any dog that's sensitive. And that goes a long way to kind of help them realize that people can be trusted. Because I think a lot of times with the dogs that are extra sensitive, they end up having trust issues with humans. And so then anything that a human is trying to do, even if they mean well and the dog might not know that they mean well. And so I think it's very important to come up with tailored approaches for every individual dog. Because not all dogs are super, super sensitive, but I think that most dogs are, at least a little bit sensitive. And so preventing trauma is obviously that's the most ideal way of going about it, but we can't always avoid trauma. And so I think having a repertoire of skills to deal with that trauma is very helpful for pet pros and for their parents as well.
Mhm. So one thing to notice when trauma happens, and I like your approach into trauma informed. As a end user or as a parent, what we need to understand is how it looks like to notice the first problem situations. So the first thing that we see here is behavior changes. For example, aggression towards strange people, suddenly towards animals or specific situations. And you have to see how those the dogs generalize the problem. I'm in a confined space. There's strangers people here. There are other dogs barking at me. I'm in a panic situation. All these individual pieces become part of that trauma, right? So even if the dog being the groomer, and obviously the groomer and everything is fine, suddenly aggression issue towards people. The dog just generalized the idea. My parents brought me somewhere. I ended up in a closed space. Somebody else dealt with me, and I'm afraid of that person. Plus, all these individual dogs that barked at me and were very stressed. I hate strange situations suddenly. And also, you can see from physical signs, so trembling, shaking, shivering, pacing, excessive drooling, changes in appetite. So, if I, for example, if I take my dog to the groomer, she will not eat for a week, right? And she's going to holistic groomer. We worked extensively of helping her feeling better about that, but it's a complex trauma situation, so it's something that's ongoing. Um, but also we see in those physical signs also excessive grooming herself and self-mutilation. So suddenly dogs scratching themselves, chewing themselves, and behaving weird. This is also part of signs of trauma, and we shouldn't not just ignore it because we have an excuse for it.
Right.
Hyper vigilance, constant being on edge, and everything is startled. I hear people always tell me my dog suddenly is reactive to everything, to every noise. He startles, he barks everything at night, at day. What should I do? And suddenly they end up on medication on that, right? Um, we also see dogs who come from a trauma experience that it starts being very sensitive to new situations. They're always trying to find the problem, scanning the area, just in case they're going to experience that again. And of course, separation anxiety, extreme
Right.
stress when dogs suddenly be left alone. Because we remember back when we dropped off the dog at the grooming salon and we walked away and all these bad things happened, that dog doesn't want you to go away again because all these bad things are happening to them. um, Destructive behavior, attempts to escape, chewing on crate, or start chewing on stuff, shoes, corners, tables, everything that a dog feels comfortable with. Inappropriate elimination is another example. Is all of a sudden the dog's peeing and poop in the house, and people don't understand why, right? Changing in sleep patterns. Suddenly the dog doesn't feel safe to sleep. Every time he hears a noise, he has an inability to sleep and rest, which also part the restlessness, and nightmares. Lack of interest. Suddenly the dog changes of playing with toys or playtime, everything that has to do with you or other people suddenly, right?
Right.
um I lost my track.
Well, I
um
think the trust is very important because of that, the hesitancy to trust humans after abuse or trauma.
right, right.
So it's important for us to help the dog feel like there are humans that can be trusted, and that will help heal that trauma as well, so that we can go forward with trust techniques and building that trust with dogs that have previously been abused. Obviously, things like punishment can lead to that lack of trust with humans. And so that's why we take the holistic approach to help build up that trust and allow the dog to feel safer and in tune. And in turn, that makes them also cooperate with us more.
Thank you. One other thing that we see here is also lack of interest with everyday interaction. So the dog suddenly stops playing with the kids. The dog suddenly doesn't play with his toys or suddenly doesn't engage with other interactions with other animals. One other thing that we see very often is excessive panting and drooling. So it's not because the dog is hot, but suddenly all these individual stressors and sounds, your dishwasher, your hair blower, the vacuum cleaner add additional stress, and the dog basically suddenly lives in a stress environment, in this stress bubble, and everything that you do just reinforces that part. Um, Avoidance behaviors. So suddenly the dog hides and escapes if you want to put him a leash on, or if you call your dog inside the house, the dog's just avoiding that. Or some people use crates for confinement or playpens. The dog just doesn't want to go in there anymore. Or sometimes the dog doesn't want to go out for a walk or doesn't want to go in the car anymore. And that is again connected to those traveling towards those places. So you call the dog in from the outside, put him in a leash on, got in the car, went to the groomer, boom, trauma. Um, Reactive behaviors, suddenly snapping, biting, lunging at people and reaching out hands, and want to put your dog's harness on and suddenly the dog attacks you and bites you in your face, right? But also regressing behaviors for where the dog already has improved behaviors, all of a sudden you have this kind of setbacks. So these are the things that you can recognize that something suddenly is there. So even if you call the groomer or the vet's office or the daycare and tell them and call them out on that, you would definitely not get a good answer about that. Obviously, they're gonna tell you, well, doesn't happen to us. We're our professionals, super educated, but we know better because those
Right.
businesses usually are low cost. How much would you pay for a person to just take care of dogs and cleaning the poop? Who's going to do that work? Somebody
Right.
who's in need, somebody who loves the animals, we're going to do it for a while and then it's going to be burned out with all these things, right?
Hmm.
So, what do you think is the solution once the dog shows all these signs of trauma? What can we do next?
I think part of the is to mitigate the trauma is to take a new approach. And so if there was a previous approach that was maybe causing your dog stress, well then try a new approach. Because every dog's different. And so obviously we want to use positive reinforcement training techniques and other very gentle techniques of dealing with things, but every dog's going to respond differently. And so something that I saw specifically in the dog daycares that had me feeling upset was that even for the little dog groups, we would use the spray bottles, and so it was the puppy group, the little dogs. And it got to the point where they would just see the spray bottle and they would wince. And, that's very upsetting. And so, I think that it's extremely important for us to try out different techniques for each dog and see what works best for them and kind of monitor their stress levels. Um, because every dog is gonna experience things differently. So, like I said, taking an individualized approach, I think, is extremely important. Not assuming that one technique will work with every dog because it won't. Um, and then changing things accordingly. So, for example, if the recall that you're trying with your dog isn't working, or the high value treat you're using isn't working, then be able to kind of shift things as you go to make it the best for that dog specifically.
Very well put. As holistic care professional for many years in the past, I was more like a holistic boutique kind of service, um, private home, individual beds, individual food. Some people would just drop the dog off, and I would take care of everything, including making their food, creating their food. I would just skip the kibble kind of thing. Situations often where people tell me, "Do whatever is things right. I want to come back later, and know that my dog is being taken care of." And I'm telling you, I wasn't cheap.
Yeah.
I wouldn't pay that money to bring my dog somewhere. But people want to invest in a service where the animals feel safe.
Right.
And when the dog, by the end of the day, comes home, he comes home happier.
Hmm.
He's not happy to come home, he comes happy.
Yeah.
There's a big difference because many people, the dog comes happy to meet the person. People says, "Oh my God, he looks great." Yeah, because we see that, "Oh my God, you're back. I'm so happy you're back."
Hmm.
But I'm not happy where I was, right? And this is where sometimes then the other people take advantage of it, things making up for things that happened in the past, just at that moment of reunifying with the owner.
Right.
And all those lies in the background, you mentioned them already. So
Yeah.
if somebody wants to go the holistic route, it's not about doing business. It's
Right.
about understanding the animal needs
Hmm.
first, because for caring for the animals, you want to make sure that all these needs are met. And then you go the next step and says, what is the wellness level of my dog? Because all these needs are met. How does I make my dog feel better than just his needs? Just because a
Right.
dog needs to go to the bathroom doesn't mean he needs to go to the bathroom, right? He needs to go to the bathroom and have fun being in the bathroom and not feeling scared being on the leash, being barked at on his way out. So I feel we have a need for healthy facilities. We have a need for healthy thinking professionals. Money is out there, right? If you want to make money, you will make money. But at the same time, if you focus on money, you will not make money. You will make
Right.
dirty money, and that's not what you want. But the industry is open. I'm I'm paying so much money to bring my dog to the hotel room, right? But I'm limited what I can do in my vacation. If I would have a guarantee that my dog goes for the same amount of money to a place here nearby, I'll do it. It's worth the money because I'm spending the same money on the other side anyway. Can my dog have fun in that place? Can my dog enjoy being more social, being himself? And I know sometimes as caregivers, we're overbearing our dogs. We want them to be a certain way, the way we want them to be. But in those places where they're more social, where they're healthy animals, healthy supervision, experienced professionals, experienced professionals, the dog actually reaches his potential. And I think
Right.
that's the key factor. And I like the way you approach and you explain those things, that we want the dog to be dog. We want the dog to be his species. And taking dogs as pets, limiting their freedoms, we need to give them freedoms back. So even if it's a grooming, yes, consent has to happen. Yes, you have to have a couch in your grooming salon because the dog feels safe on the couch. Yes, maybe you have to sit on the couch and trim his nails instead of putting on a table from convenience. Yes, sometimes you're going to spend an hour or more grooming the people who will pay for it. And if those people don't want to pay for it, these are not your people.
Right.
Let it go. It's okay. You're going to get better people. If people know that you take care of their dogs, the word comes around, you get better and better, healthier clients that take their dogs' needs serious and they know that you can provide those needs. So I think I like your approach, and I like over the years I've been in a holistic lifestyle since 2011, and I felt very alone, like you did. I felt very alone in that system. I being really bullied by other colleagues
Right.
about being holistic. No, I'm
Yeah.
not driving a Prius because I'm holistic, right? But I'm conscious what I'm doing. I'm conscious what I'm putting in my house. I'm conscious, what food I'm feeding my dog. I'm conscious about the detergents I'm using in the house. I'm conscious about the clean water. I'm conscious about everything. Just like a dog has to be conscious about everything in his environment.
So I think something else that's important for those that are wanting to take a holistic approach, that if you are looking for like professional services, that you really do your due diligence to ask the right questions. Because even places that, might use the word holistic, they're not always that. And so you got to kind of do your investigative work. So if you're someone that does, want to have your dog socialize during the day while you're at work because maybe they don't do so well on their own, then another option would be like a private pet sitter. I actually did the private pet sitting for 3 years, and I realized that it was actually a lot better for some of the dogs to have like a pet sitter that would come and hang out with them, take them for a walk, rather than being in a facility that was very stressful and very crowded. And so if your dog is more sensitive, then maybe just hiring someone to, come in your house and visit with your dog is better than, taking them to the very high volume dog daycare where, it's not very relaxing or fun for them when they're stressed out. So I urge everybody that has a sensitive dog to seek out more of a private one-on-one care rather than even a high volume grooming salon for a sensitive dog can be very stressful. So I always tell people to look for those one-on-one groomers or those private pet sitters that can come to your home and that sort of thing, because sometimes that alone can help avoid that extra trauma that your pet might experience when going somewhere that's more busy or somewhere, because like I said, in the dog daycares it's sometimes one attendant 50 dogs, so you want something that's a little bit more individualized. So finding someone that can come to your home or someone that can take your dog out for a walk by themselves, that can make a big difference in making their day actually fun instead of extra stressful.
One thing that I remember doing research when I started my business was looking what these businesses offer that is health oriented. So I'm going to the vet, and the first thing I see is conglomerate dog food, prescription food. And I'm like, no. If
Yeah,
if you think of nutrition as health factor, then that should supposed not to be in your professional business. There are healthier foods out there to put in your business rather than those who actually don't care about health.
right.
The next thing is, what are the alternative therapies that this service business offers. I mean, even if you're a groomer, or even if you are a pet care professional, you as a healing modalities professionals also use healing in your practice. That's good. So I'm asking those questions too. Like, what do you do in when my dog has a problem? Oh, we're gonna do some Reiki on him. We're gonna do some golden frequency on them. We're gonna add some incense there. We're gonna help him. We're gonna put some music on there. We're gonna lower the lights a little bit. So the person should understand alternative solutions, not
Right.
just dragging the dog down and give him, special allergy medications to kind of knock them out for a little bit. And then I'm going to ask questions. What is your treatment plan? If something happens, for example, suddenly my dog shows fear, what do you do? Well, you put him in a crate, or you're going to take him with your bed and snuggle with him for a little bit longer, or take him out for a walk to kind of chill him out a little bit. Or you're going to call me and tell me, hey, what is your regular schedule? I remember I had a dog a couple of years back. It was a Ridgeback, and he was a very loving and cared for animal in their house. And he came to my property for staying for a month because his people went on a holiday, kind of like not holiday, like wedding trip. And that dog wouldn't go to the bathroom for the first 2 days. Well, I texted them and I said, "Can I come to your house so I can let the dog out in your yard because the dog doesn't poop in my yard. He wants to go back to his own yard." So he took me an hour trip, went to their house, he eliminated, and I started working him up from that situation back to the house. Yes, I did a couple of trips throughout the week, but it is worth for the dog, right? Other things that I consider is, does my professional adjust his services to my dog's needs, or are they just going by the book? Even if I have to pay more for it, for this individual treatment, I understand that my dog is weird and he has these weird needs, and I need to accommodate that, and I don't expect everybody to work like a clock. Can I have more time for my dog? Yes or no? And then how do we are preventative? Does the professional suggest you certain techniques to help your dog? I always ask my people, do you have any calming remedies for your dog that he already gets used to? And like, oh yeah, I do this and that. Well, when you bring me the package, put it in there, give him the treats that you usually do. What do you do at nighttime before going to bed? Oh yeah, we're gonna have some snuggle time and we can chew on stuff. Good. I see if I can implement that. So I try to accommodate the dog with his everyday routines to try to implement them. Even if the dog is at the vet's office and has to stay there for surgery, can he bring his blankets? Can he have his toys in there? I hate the concept. It's the insurance policy that you cannot go behind the doors. I don't think this is true. I think if I have my child in a hospital and he has to go and get something done, why can I not be, as a parent, part of that? Would we accept the insurance policy? No, we don't, because we want to be with our child because our child needs us. So I don't understand also that routine, that the parent cannot go with the dog behind this magic black door.
Yeah.
I really hate that. And I think that is one of the main problems we have in the dog industry, is veterinary care and grooming care and um, boarding care happens behind closed doors, and that
Right.
shouldn't happen. There should be a transparency where my dog is staying, how he's staying, what his handlings look like. I want to see that, right? And I don't know screenshots of little video tubes, the dog playing in the pool, while in
Yeah.
the meantime he has an empty water bowl and he pooped all over the place, and then nobody has time to clean it up,
Right.
right?
One
And the other
thing that
part, yeah.
oh, one thing that I wanted to say when it comes to trauma and the pet parents and the pets is that a lot of times we'll mirror each other. And so like if we have a trauma, sometimes we'll inadvertently kind of push that onto our animal without really doing it on purpose. Or on the other aspect is that we are purposely kind of drawn to an animal that maybe has a similar trauma that we have. And so I think a big part with dealing with our animals' trauma is kind of dealing with our own. And so being mindful of our own traumas as they come up and maybe seeing how we might push that onto our animals. So for me, I didn't realize how bad my anxiety was until I got a dog that had really bad anxiety. And so it's actually been a really good thing for me because then it helps me kind of sense when my anxiety is coming up, when I'm kind of fueling my dog's anxiety, and she kind of does the same thing with me sometimes. And so I think that that level of taking care of ourselves, our own traumas, even just starting out by like breath work or meditation, it can make a
Right,
big
right.
difference for our animals because they really feed off our energy. And so if we're working on our issues, then our dog will kind of feel like they can do the same thing.
Very interesting comments here. Where um,
Yeah, so the fear free certified professionals. I know that a lot of veterinary offices aren't really willing to work with people that have dogs that are scared. So I haven't actually went to a fear free certified vet, but I have heard that they do make a big difference. So for those that might be having some issues with that, maybe look for a vet that either holistic or integrative or has the fear free certified so they can offer a little bit of extra care for the dogs that have issues at the vet.
I had a traumatic experience myself at the vets actually recently. I went to the vet. In the description, it was a holistic vet. In the description said fear free certified. And I'm like, that's it. This is
Yeah.
where I'm going. So I went there. And of course, I didn't met the vet that actually have planned to go, but I met another vet. And that particular vet obviously wasn't fear free certified. So it wasn't a fear free certified business. It was a fear free certified vet who actually was once in a while there. He wasn't actually full time there.
Oh.
Right. And so I tapped full in that trap. They grabbed my dog by the leash and dragged him over to them by the leash. The dog was sitting politely next to me, a little chihuahua, right? Sitting
Aw.
polite next to me. She was kind of concerned, but she was okay because we worked so many years from that. And she grabbed the dog and pulled them over to her. It was a female veterinarian. Pick up the dog without consent and put them, not slammed them actually, but put them on the table, on a slippery table with no surface protection. And my dog started shivering and
Oh.
clamped on her like this on her hand.
Oh.
And I'm basically kind of like helpless sitting there. I
Yeah.
totally
It's
did
like
not happen except.
yeah.
And what happens next? Kind of, I lost my shit there. She told me, oh, she loves me. She hugs me.
Oh my
And
goodness.
I'm like, no, she doesn't. I got up. I went, took the dog, went to the car. It took me a couple of minutes to calm down. Then I called my wife and cried over it.
Yeah.
Literally, I was traumatized by not being able to help my dog because I didn't see it coming. It just happened.
Yeah.
So shit can happen any moment. So please do your work diligence if you go in there. Make sure your vet you're working with, if you go for a fear-free veterinarian, is fear-free certified. And even if he's fear-free certified, doesn't mean he actually does it,
Yeah.
right? Unfortunately. Oh man, we can talk another 15 hours over that. So we're gonna have a
Yeah.
follow-up here because I think we have some open things, and I see many people start recognizing and talking about that trauma. And we want to look more into how to heal it instead of how to fix it. And one important part is how can we heal the industry as well. It's not just
Right.
fixing the problem with dogs and the professionals, is how can we actually improve the industry,
Right.
because that's the main problem here that I think.
Right.
Morgan, it was very nice meeting you. um, we are almost neighbors. You're coming moving around a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe at some point you end up here in Eugene, and we're going to have that conversation soon in extension. So meanwhile, if you guys are interested to learn more about Morgan, you're gonna go to her website, Whole Hounds.
Yeah, it's
Dot.
WholisticHounds.dog. And it's
Oops,
holistic with a
oopsies!
W.
You didn't tell me that for so.
Yeah, I think we posted in the comments.
Right, right. So my apologies for my oopsies.
That's okay.
Let's take that away from here. It shouldn't be out there. And learn a little bit about that. If you're interested to get a consultation with Morgan, you can schedule an appointment through her website. Talk about it, share your concerns, learn how to be proactive, preventative, and how to ask the right questions. Morgan, we're going to walk you through that. And if you're in that area in Bend, maybe you're going to have a personal session, get your little baby up and running.
Yeah.
Um, is there anything you want to say closing?
I just wanted to thank you for collaborating with me today, and I hope that we, going forward, can have more talks about trauma because there is so much to talk about.
Right, right. So thank you everyone for watching and thank you for sharing. And you still comment, and Morgan and I will still monitor the comments and making sure you guys get the right answers. Yeah, and looking forward to hear from you again.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for watching today.